Feels like we have gotten through the first couple of weeks, and now we're into that off and running part of the college baseball season. Not quite to conference play. It'll get here before we know it. Mm-hmm. So with, 3 full weekends in the books, what have you seen so far that really stands out to you?
I think the presence of the long ball in college baseball. I mean, we're about 900 home runs over what we had last year at this time, and that's a pretty significant number. I don't know, from the games you've seen, if you've seen more power production, but to have 900 to 1,000 more home runs at this point in the season versus last year at this point is pretty loud. And granted, I will say the weather's been a little warmer this year. I feel like the weather has definitely been much warmer, at least here in Texas, in the last month. But still, to have that much more power production, that's really kind of standing out to me. I think the other thing for me is the pitch rules are growing on me. At first I was kind of one of those people. It's like, man, I don't really like these pitch clock rules. But I mean, tell you what, I don't know how many games you've been to, but it has sped up the game. I mean, I think of all the games I've gone to, other than A&M and the Texas Tech going 16 innings the other night, I think every game I've been to has been, within 2.5 to 3.5 hours, and that's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, because absent those rules with the uptick in offense, we might be at the ball yard forever.
No, there's no doubt. And I'll be honest with you, I'm even looking at the extra inning rules and thinking, you know what? After sitting through 16 innings of A&M and Texas Tech that night, I'm kind of like, you know what? I might actually be okay with that. The problem you run into with those extra inning games is if you get in those 12, let's say you play 15 innings, when you get in those 11 to 15 inning games, everybody's just hacking. And if that's a quick way to remedy that, and also, by the way, make it really exciting for the fans.
Yeah, I suppose that's the case. Let's pull it back to the SEC. There were some week one overreactions, right? There were people that overreacted to Tennessee. Now, in fairness, Tennessee played really good teams in the first week, and then they came home and they've had a kind of a garbage schedule since then, and they've won a bunch of games in a row. But this Tennessee team is good. There was some overreaction after the first week to Tennessee, not necessarily from you guys, but from other places. I might argue that there was overreaction before the season began to LSU, like crowning them the greatest team in the history of college baseball might have been a little premature. They've been good. I don't know if they've been great. I don't know if they've looked unbeatable. Give me a couple of storylines of SEC teams that maybe you think we overreacted to earlier. Maybe we've even undervalued.
Well, I would say overvalued. I would say at this point A&M. I saw A&M over the weekend, and granted they came back and won the Texas Tech game, and give them credit for that, credit for going 3-1. But this is an offense that has been much different. Honestly, Richard, kind of going back to these clock rules, if you remember last year, and I remember Ole Miss fans were grumbling, and rightfully so, when I was watching that series on TV, they were the classic step out of the box, readjust 8 different things, and get back in the box. And I don't think it's a coincidence that early this season they've really scuffled offensively. Now, Austin Bose and a few others have kind of figured things out offensively. But, A&M, outside of their pitching, has been a little suspect for me. Again, kind of like last year, I think they'll be fine. But they're a question mark for me. I think, LSU has been really good. They have not been this unbeatable force. And anybody that thought they'd be unbeatable in the SEC was crazy. But they've been good. They haven't been great. I think Tennessee has shown since, trip out west that they'll be just fine. I think when you look around the country or look around the conference, the really interesting thing for me is the kind of the parallels between Arkansas and Ole Miss. Both schools, lost their Friday guy. Granted, Ole Miss hasn't lost Hunter Elliott for the year just yet. They're going to give him a shot to come back. But, Arkansas loses Jackson Wiggins. They lost Brady Tiger now in the back end. Granted, he's probably out 5 or 6 weeks with the UCL strain. That's a tough injury to come back from. But then you look at Ole Miss, losing Josh Malice before the season. And so the parallel between those two schools is pretty interesting to me. And then I kind of look at clubs like Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn. All 3 of those teams have played exceptionally good baseball here early on. Outside of Clemson over the weekend with South Carolina, those 3 teams have not played great competition. So I'm just curious to see how, once they get into conference play, how those 3 programs fare, because South Carolina and Alabama were 2 programs we thought would take a big step forward this year. A lot of people criticize us for even having them ranked. And so far, they've looked pretty good, but we'll see if that continues when conference play begins in a couple of weeks.
You've made passing mention. Let's talk specifically about the three schools here in Mississippi that so many people keep their eyes on.
Yeah.
Ole Miss still sitting at number 4. That's where they were to begin the season. They're 10-2. Game against Southern Miss tonight. They've got Purdue this coming weekend, and then they're going to roll into SEC play in just a brutal first half of the league schedule. Ole Miss has really swung it well. So I guess two parts. One, do you believe they will continue to be this good offensively? And two, are you starting to buy into them figuring it out on the mound, or are you worried about their pitching long term?
Well, I'll say this about their offense. I'm not surprised they're hitting the way they are. I thought they made some outstanding additions in the offseason. Anthony Calarco is certainly just a well-known, consistent, productive college baseball player. Obviously, I loved Ethan Groff at Tulane.
Yeah.
When he went to Ole Miss, I was thinking, man, that's a really good pickup when you throw him in the mix with the rest of that lineup. But, they've been very good top to bottom. Kemp Alderman has kind of taken that step forward that we all kind of expected. And granted, he was good last year, but I feel like he's taken that next step forward. TJ McCants has had some big hits. And I think, pitching-wise, the bad news is you may not get Hunter Elliott back. It's to be determined at this point. You don't have Josh Mallett. But you know what? You lost those two guys early in the season. And I think if you're Ole Miss, you would much rather lose those guys, week 2 or preseason than lose those guys in the middle of conference play. Because now I think if you're Lapp and you might be Bianco, you can kind of look at the situation and go, okay, we're behind the 8 ball a little bit. But you know what we can do? We can find out a formula that allows us to win games once we get into conference play. And here's the thing. They're such a good offensive team but I don't think they need some just, rock star pitching stuff. Like, I think if they can go into conference play and, allow 4 to 5 runs a game, I think they're going to win a lot of baseball games in that conference. So it's just a really lucky year that their offense is this good because I think that their offense is probably one of the top 3 or 4 in the country for me.
Kendall, I thought on the heels of losing a series to Illinois and losing to Mississippi State when you had a lead late in the midweek, the sweep of Dallas Baptist for Southern Miss was just massive.
It was huge. And I think the biggest takeaway I have on USN is they pitched well. I think we all looked at the Illinois series, and granted, Illinois didn't play that bad against Wake Forest a few weeks ago, but I think we all looked at that Illinois series and said, whoa, like we've all talked about how great, Ostrander's pitching staff is, but man, they get bombed by Illinois and they, struggle against Mississippi State, and they come back over the weekend against a good DBU club and they take care of business. So I think the biggest thing for them, as you look with conference play beginning a couple weekends in San Marcos, is you want to play well against Ole Miss tonight. You want to kind of get the get the pitching staff to continue to get back on track. But there's no doubt when you look at the weekend against DBU, I don't think DBU is a great team, but they are definitely a postseason caliber club. And to pitch that well just kind of reaffirms what I think, that this is a really good baseball team.
Let's do this for Mississippi State. Buy, sell, or hold. You look at this Mississippi State team, it has been a disaster defensively. They have not swung it consistently, and pitching has been a problem as well. Are you selling Mississippi State? Are you holding them? Or I'm assuming buy is not necessarily the route that you'll go.
I'm holding for now. I'm always one of those people. I call it the Texas A&M rule, and that goes back to last year when A&M, ironically enough, the Frisco Classic, they could not have looked worse. And this is right after, remember, this is a week after they lost the series to Penn at home. And, I remember we're all thinking, like, oh, boy, man, we're going to, like, Jim Schlossnagle was really going to regret going there because they're about to finish last in the league. Well, they finished Final Four in the country. And so I'm not sitting here saying Mississippi State's going to do that. But what I'm saying is, like, all these people are, Chris Lemonis needs to be fired now, and this team has no shot. Like, let's let the season play, or let's at least let the first few weeks of conference play out before you draw conclusions. But there's no doubt, man, if you do not play defense in this league, and frankly, if you don't play defense against Ohio, teams like Cal, Ohio State, and Oklahoma, you're not going to win a lot of games. But if you don't play defense in the SEC, you're in trouble. And they've got guys in that lineup who have fielding percentages under 900, and that's going to have to improve. And the problem you run into is they're not playing great defense, and we all know that is kind of, that's interconnected with the pitching. If the defense is going to struggle, The pitching's probably going to struggle. And so they need those two things. They need those two wires to kind of come together, so to speak. And I continue to have major question marks on just their weekend rotation. Like, the switch pitcher has done a really nice job for them at times this year. But, I mean, I know they call it like a spot start, but, like, is he a guy that, doing SEC play that you want to have to rely on Friday and Saturday, like a young arm like